I'm Jennifer Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Student Success Center as part of the Jobs for the Future Student Success Center Network. And we have a lot of the work that we're doing here today and in the institutes and some of the math pathways and the developmental English work you all are engaged in is supported by the center and through the network of Jobs for the Future across the country. Some of the research that we are seeing, Jobs for the Future has helped to disseminate that through the center network. I want to call out Andrea Yunkos, who's here somewhere in the room, is our state lead. So she has been very helpful in trying to make sure that we get the information and the resources we need to do some of this work. So thanks to Andrea and the team at Jobs for the Future. They've done a lot to support this work. I also want to say a quick thank you. Yesterday you heard from Kimberly Collins. No one thanked her, but she has done a huge amount, and Andrea Wade at Monroe Community College to make sure this is all happening for us. So I'd love for you guys to give them a round of applause. And also planning team members, we thank Mary Rose for her service for the planning team for the institutes, but also Kim Scalzo and Deb Meckel from SUNY System have been very instrumental in helping us. So let's give them a round. Okay, so I don't want to talk too long because I'm already eating into Darla Cooper's time and we're excited. She's come in from California to talk to us about what they're seeing there. But I do want to say that your team strategy sessions for the morning are in this yellow piece of paper, so please take note. The only two schools that there are changes to are for Monroe and Jamestown. You'll stay in this room during your team strategy sessions, so just wanted to give that update. And then also your evaluations. So we ask you to fill these out throughout the day, so it's not a big rush at the end to fill out the evaluations. So please do that. We do use, as Renee said yesterday, we do use your feedback to plan future events. So finally, I'm going to stop speaking because I know you want to hear from Darla. I definitely do. She is the Executive Director for Research and Planning for the California Community College's RP group. She's a leader and an expert in evaluation, data, evidence to improve the lives of community college students. Her bio is in the book. I'm not going to read it. But she also was the coach for several AACC 1.0 campuses. So she has a real knowledge of what's going on in other campuses across the country in terms of the guided pathways work. And we're excited that she's come from California to talk to us today. And I'd love for you to give her a round of applause to start and one to finish.
Good morning. Good morning. Close enough? Kathleen. All right, can you hear me if I can stand here? Yes. Is this a little better? I could just pick it up, right? That's what happens when you're tall. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good. This is weird for me. I'm from California. We don't have humidity, and we don't have rain. So I'm getting it all. Thank you so much for having me here. I love the opportunity to kind of go to different parts of the country and learn about you and what you're doing and how your system is set up differently and how colleges are, but I also learn a lot about how we're all the same and how our students have the same struggles, the same successes, the same challenges, the same victories. So hopefully what I have to share with you today will, even though the research that this is based on is from California students, I think wherever I've been, it still resonates. And I would also say it resonates beyond community college. I think this is any student in higher education, these things apply to. And I'm also hoping that it speaks to your intuition. A lot of you will see, hopefully I'll see a lot of heads nodding, going, yes, I'm doing that, we should be doing that kind of thing. So hopefully this stuff will resonate. Just a quick, no? Try the clicker. I guess we should have tested this before I started. Hit enter. Thank you. Hello, technical people. Okay. So just a quick note on the RP group, the Research and Planning Group. We're an independent nonprofit that works, as I call, system adjacent with the California Community College system and its 115 colleges in the state of California. So I said we do primarily research, which is what I'm sharing with you today, but we also do a lot of evaluation, technical assistance, we also do professional development, so we're all over the place, but in a good way. So I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what Student Support Redefined is. I'm going to go over some things that students told us that helps them be successful, and then bring the two together with what we found in Student Support Redefined and with Guided Pathways. So Student Support Redefined was a research study that we did, and this was our research question at the time. Okay, this was back in 2012. This work has legs. It has some very core principles to it that I don't think expire. I don't think are dated, and I hope that as I share those with you, you will agree. And so that's why the first part of this says extreme scarcity, because we were still coming out of the recession, and we weren't getting any more money at that time, but the expectations for higher education were going up, accountability was going up, and we're all going, how are we going to do better with no more money? That was where we were coming from. And we wanted to pay special attention to African American and Latino students because of the equity gaps that we see with those groups. So very quickly, what we did was a study, involved 13 of the colleges. We did a survey, a telephone survey, and followed that up with some focus groups. And we also, after that, we did a lot of dissemination work, a lot of trying to get people engaged, which was a new thing for us, because there's a lot of research outfits, you've probably seen them. They do the research, they produce the report, and send it out. Okay, good luck with that. Well, we went out and tried to engage people, and so it was that's why it says the study actually happened like over a 6-month period, but there was a lot of iterative processes that happened afterwards, and we took a lot of the feedback from people saying, you know what would be really helpful is if you would do this, if you would do that. Not so much new research, but in part of the dissemination. So that was a big part of this study, is figuring out how to engage people in the research. You can't just do it and print it. You've got to help people figure out what to do with it, because that's the question, right? You read a study and you're like, yeah, what do I do now? Right, so we tried to help with some of that, with action guides and a couple of handouts that are in your, under the resources tab in your binder, which are these very practical tools which have been very popular and very useful for faculty and staff and administrators in California. So we got to reach about 900 students, mostly through the survey, and the survey lasted 20 minutes. So the fact that we were able to get almost 900 students to stay on the phone with us for 20 minutes, we thought that was pretty good. And then there was another 100 students who did the focus groups. So this is the crux of it. This is the core, are the 6 success factors. And so I'm just going to go through those in the order in which students prioritize them. Okay? So the first one was directed. Directed is simply a student having a goal and knowing what to do to achieve that goal. So it's not just having the goal. You have to know what to do to reach your goal, what classes to take, what other steps to take in and out of class to be successful in meeting that goal. So this particular quote, for each of the success factors, I'm just going to share a quote from a student in one of the focus groups. And we like to share this one because it shows the power that you all have, regardless of your role at your campus, to affect a student's life, just by asking a simple question about, like, why are you in college? Right? And it's asking it from a caring point of view. I've had a couple people read this, and they in their own voice, I guess, I hope not, it came out, what are you doing in college? Why are you here? And I said, please don't do that. It's more of a, I care about you. What are your interests? Why are you in college? Where are you going with this? Kind of a question. And the other thing I love about this quote is her initial response to why she was in college is fun and stuff. And as I always say, I don't have anything against fun or stuff, though I don't know what that is. As an educator, that's not usually the first answer I want to hear from a student as to why they're in college. Maybe second, but not first. But this quote is illustrating that it was a professor, by asking her this question, kind of got her to wake up a little bit and figure out, why am I in college? Because a lot of our students, I think most of our students know why they're here. They have a goal. But there is a portion of them who come because it's just what you do. It's what you do after high school. My friends went here. My parents made me. I need to stay on their insurance. Whatever their reasons are, but they're all, and even the ones who think they have an idea of why they're here, it's not crystal clear. They need some help from us to find that clear direction, right? And so that lines up perfectly with guided pathways, right? That's what we're talking about, is having that pathway and knowing what you need to do to complete your goal. A very close second to directed, and actually when you talk to students, they're kind of inextricably linked, is focus, right? You've got to be focused on your goal. And that is kind of defined as like keeping your eye on the prize. It's doing the daily work, right? It's going to class, it's doing your homework, it encompasses organizational skills, time management, and motivation, right? So it's everything that you need to just keep going towards your goal. And when you talk to students, they say you can't be successful without direction and focus. And that a lot of times one kind of leads to the other, right? So what keeps you focused is that goal, right? Because you have something to, to be working towards, right? So they kind of saw those two as, like I said, inextricably linked and the most two important things to their success, okay? This quote I like to share. How many of your colleges have some kind of degree works or degree audit? Okay, good. Yeah, this doesn't happen in California. Oh shoot, I'm being recorded. Okay. But so we're working on it, but it's not as prevalent, if I asked a room of this size, I wouldn't get as many hands. But one thing I'd like to, if you haven't figured out already, is the role these systems can play in student motivation. They're very handy systems, right? It helps students know what to take and what they have taken and what requirements they've met and how far they have to go, and all of that is very practical. It's a great tool for them, it's a great tool for us. But we had so many students tell us how they use that to motivate them, especially when they've had a bad day, a bad grade, a bad, a course grade or a test grade or something like that, when they're feeling like a failure. They can go into these kinds of systems and look at it, and they can see how far they've come, and they can see how close they are to their goal, and it helps them keep going. And so some of our students have that kind of self-motivation to pull themselves up when they've had a failure, but not all of our students do. And actually one of the findings, I don't have them in here, but I'll throw them in as I think of them, which is one of the unique findings we found for African American and Latino students, was that they were much more likely to be rocked by a bad grade, by failing a course. They were much more likely to drop out. And I think, and again, we didn't pursue this, but it's something that came out, but just from talking to different students, is that it's the difference between failing and feeling like a failure, right? And so whatever we can do to help students really understand the difference between the two, and that just because you fail doesn't make you a failure. You have to remember, a lot of students come here with messages of how they're not college material, they shouldn't be here, they're wasting their time, they're not smart enough. This is what they've been hearing, in some cases, for 20 or more years. And we're trying to break that cycle. And so anything you can do to help that student know that difference between failing and being a failure will help. So number 3 came in third, nurturing. So this is the one where we put that out there at first, and we got a little pushback. Got some pushback from my colleagues, saying that's not my job, right? I'm not here to baby them. I'm not going to mother them. I'm not going to lower my expectations. But you know what? When we talk to students, you know what it all came down to? Does anybody care? Does anybody at this college care? Does anybody know my name? Anybody know anything about me? Anybody know my struggles, my successes, my goals, my dreams? Anybody ask me how I'm doing and wait for the answer? Does anybody care? Does anybody see me? Anybody hear me? Anybody notice if I'm not there? That's what students said. They just want someone to care. And a lot of our students are fortunate enough to have this caring at home, and that's great. But some of them don't. Some of them have families who aren't necessarily supportive, or they don't have families at all to be supportive, right? So sometimes you can be that one person that cares about them and cares about their success. And so you have to remember that. This particular quote is from a student who immigrated here from Iran, and he had gone to his local community college to try to improve his English, and he just was wandering, going from office to office, couldn't find anybody to help him, didn't know what to do or where to start to get registered, and he wandered in the DSPS, which in California is our Disabled Students Office. He wandered into that office, and the woman at the front desk stopped what she was doing and helped him figure out what he needed to do. Was that her job? Was that in her job description? Probably not. You know, she's probably a receptionist, she answers phones, she greets students. He wasn't even a DSPS student, right? You have to be registered to use these services. But she stopped what she was doing, and it made a difference. The fact is, by the time I was talking to him in these focus groups, which was at least 2 or 3 years later, and he was on his way to getting his associate's degree in business by this time. And he still credits her as someone who cared about him and made a difference for him. Now again, I'm not exactly sure about the geography here in New York, but in California, at least in the urban areas, there's always another college down the road. Probably not out here, I'm guessing. And we have some places that are far-flung in California, it's a big state. But if you're in an urban area, and this was an urban area near Los Angeles, he could have just gone to the college down the road, in all seriousness. And maybe he would have. Maybe he would have just given up and gone down there. But the fact that this woman took the time to help him figure out what he needed to do, and that years later he's still crediting her with some part of his success, it shows you what a difference little gestures can make, a little bit of time, a little bit of effort in a student's life. And it doesn't matter what role you have. We always think about faculty, advisors, people whose their job is every day working, with students on these kinds of things, are the ones who can make the impact. But it's everybody, it's anybody. I've heard all different kinds of stories from people in all different kinds of jobs on the campus making big differences by doing little things for students. So after nurtured, we became engaged. And engaged is basically defined as being an active participant in your learning, and learning happens in and out of the classroom. So this quote is from a student who I would describe as one of the students who gets it. She basically says, if I'm not going to get engaged, then why did I even come to school? Why am I not taking advantage of everything? And that I need to be learning in and out of the classroom. So I always ask my audiences, what percentage of your student population do you think this quote represents? So just holler out a number. Holler. I hear whispers. 10. 30. Half. 5. Well, I think we can make a difference in this. I think one of the mistakes that we make is we don't tell students why they should be engaged. We just assume that they know, I guess. Or I don't know. I don't know what our reasons are, but we don't tell students why it's important to be engaged. And one of the things you need to tell students is what's in it for them. Just like the rest of us, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Right? Why should I do that? I'm assuming your students aren't vastly different from ours. Are a lot of your students part-time? Yes. A lot of your students work? Yes. A lot of your students single parents? Okay. And they're going to school. And they're going to try to fit in some kind of extracurricular thing? Right? So we need to do a couple of things. One, we need to tell them why it's important and how it would help them today, tomorrow, next semester, next year, for life, in the career that they're pursuing. Why is it important to get engaged? Why is it important to not just be the passive vessel that we pour information into, but that they really want to be engaged? Right? The other thing is we need to expand our definition of engagement. We think about extracurriculars as student government and student clubs. There's lots of ways that students can get engaged, but if we don't expand our minds and our definitions of what it means to be engaged outside of class, how are we going to expect them to figure it out? So we need to think about how students can get engaged. And a lot of times, because for those students I just named, being in clubs and government is not going to be their route, but maybe there's other things they can do associated with their classes. Maybe there's leadership roles they can take in their class, leading a study group, the projects, those kinds of things. But I said we need to figure out ways to get students more engaged in their learning, right? And that's on us. We can't just give students a poor product and expect them to be engaged, right? I'm going to disengage too. So we need to take our responsibility for our engagement. Connected. So this one, there's lots of research about connection and the role that it plays, but it's that sense of belonging, right? That we all kind of inherently know what it feels like to be connected. And when we ask students, what makes you feel connected? It's people, primarily. It's the relationships that they have with you, with other students. That's what makes them feel connected, right? And there's lots of studies that have shown students who feel more connected are more successful. And everybody can define connected in different ways, but being connected is important. I like to share this quote because it also shows, if you remember back to the graphic, how like there are lines going all different directions, basically connecting all the different factors to one another. What that's really trying to illustrate is that it's not, you don't go through your work with students and go, okay, now I'm going to help you find direction. Come back tomorrow and I'm going to help you focus, right? Right? We know that's not how it works. We do something and it might help a student experience multiple factors at one time. So in this quote, if you kind of read more towards the bottom, there's a start where it says, whereas you can have a professor that fully engages you. Now remember, I asked the student about connected. She's bringing this up, okay? So you have this professor that engages you. So now we've got connected and engaged, right? Then it says you can see he really cares. That's nurtured, right? And then you're more motivated. That's focused, right? Now the other thing I like to point out with this quote is nowhere in this quote does she talk about having a personal relationship with this faculty member. She's talking about how he does his lecture, how he teaches his class. There's something in the way that he does his job every day that helps this student experience that. And we have to remember that as well, because we can't all have personal relationships with every single student on our campus, right? It's not, there's too many of them and too few of us in most cases. A lot of times you can make a big difference in a student's life just by how you do your job every day. Before I was a researcher, I was a counselor. Many moons ago, but I still, any counselors in the room? Once a counselor, always a counselor, right? Anyway, back then when I was doing counseling, I was on campus and a student came up to me and said, I know you probably don't remember me. We've all had that happen, right? And of course you never tell them the truth. You say, keep talking. Anyway, so he kept talking and he said, you know, I was on academic probation when I was a freshman and I had to come see you, you know, in order to get registered, you know, for my classes. And you basically gave me the what for in terms of getting my act together, because this was a student who got on probation for being distracted, let's say, in his freshman year away from home and partying, you know, those kinds of things. And so he said, well, and in addition to kind of giving me that little bit of a kick in the pants, you told me what I needed to do to get off probation, like specifically. And he said, that made a huge difference for me, and I just wanted to come and thank you because I'm graduating this year. I would have sworn on a stack of Bibles I'd never met that young man before in my life, right? Because I didn't recognize him. There was nothing special to me, for me, about that encounter. I didn't bend over backwards for him. I didn't see him multiple times. I saw him once, okay? And he got off probation very quickly, right? But I wouldn't have ever known. And I'd like to think that he's representative of some group of students out there that I have no idea, you know, that I had some kind of effect on. So it's just remembering, because trust me, I remember the ones I've been over backwards for. And of course, those are the ones you're looking to get a thank you out of, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. But just remember how much we can affect students just by how you do your job every day. And again, we all have bad days. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's really thinking about trying to affect students' lives and that you do have an effect. And I said, little things make big differences in students' lives. So the last one was valued. And in spite of it coming in last, when you talk to students about it, it was very clear that it still needed to be on the list. It still had a big impact. And I think we all kind of inherently know what it feels like to be valued, right? That you have something to offer, you're able to contribute, and that when you do contribute, you're appreciated for it, right? I think we all kind of know what that means for students. This particular quote was from an older student, and a lot of times, you know, depending on the demographics of your campus, older students can find themselves in a class where they're one of two who are over 30, and so they just don't relate to the rest of the class. That, you know, they've already lived that life. They've got other challenges going on, and so they can feel very, you know, ostracized and isolated in that kind of situation. And what this teacher did was didn't let her do that, pulled her in by showing her value because of her experience. He said, I want you to share this with the rest of the class. Right? And so she really appreciated that, the teacher didn't just let her isolate herself from the rest of the class, but held her up as an example of someone who could share. So it's just thinking about those kinds of things. But here's the key to that. In order for us to value our students, you have to know something about them. You have to talk to them. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't talked to her that she had this prior experience. So you have to talk to the students. So when we ask students, well, what makes you feel valued? The top two answers were helping other students and ask me for my opinion. So we heard lots of stories where the students, you could just kind of see them get all puffed up, to where it's like, I was able to help the student. And they get there's a pride there. They feel like they're making a difference. That's what this really is about, right there. Bless you. And so that helping other students came in two different forms, informal and formal, right? So formal is like I'm a tutor. I work at the admissions office, those kinds of things, where they have a formal job where their job is to help students. But we heard lots of examples of just informal advice. They talk about helping a law student on campus. They talk about giving advice to their friends about which classes to take, which teachers to take, how to navigate the situation and financial aid, right? So those things make students feel valued. The second thing, ask me for my opinion. Every single focus group that I did, when we got to this question, there was at least one student who says, well, I feel valued because you asked me here today. Because you're asking me for my opinion. You seem to care about what I think. You're listening to me. And so as a researcher, I can't say anything bad about surveys or they'll kick me out of the club, right? And there's a valuable use for surveys when you need to get information across a broad group. But I also wanted to highlight the importance of qualitative research and doing focus groups and talking to your students. It's a big part of the Guided Pathways piece as well, is getting that student feedback and hearing their voices, getting their responses, learning about their experiences on a first-hand basis. So that's really important. Oh, one last thing about value. Just also think about it from your own perspective as an employee. When you feel valued as an employee, aren't you just that much more likely to stick it out, to stay late, to go the extra mile, right, to persevere? No, you're not? Okay. Well, it's not any different for students. Think about it. If they feel like they matter, if they feel like they make a difference at this college, maybe they'll be just that much more likely to stick it out when they run into that bump in the road. Okay? So just think about it from that perspective. So as you saw, this is just really scratching the surface, but we had a lot of data. Again, 800 20-minute surveys, telephone surveys, plus another 12 hours of focus groups. Lots of information is there. It's all on the website. The link is here. But we felt like we needed to kind of boil it down to some key takeaways, these key themes. So the first one is about student motivation. And I need to be very clear here. Their motivation is their responsibility. And most students get that. There's a few that don't. But most students do understand that their motivation is their responsibility. But we have a role in it. And you can either have a positive role or a negative role. Positive impact or negative impact. So the question is, are you putting up policies, procedures, interactions with students that make them bang their head up against the wall until they finally give up? Or are you putting in springboards and things that drive momentum, things that increase their chances of success? So really need to take a hard look as you're going through this Guided Pathways efforts and ask yourself that question. What role are you playing in students' motivation? Are you hindering it or are you facilitating? Okay, again, their responsibility, but you have a role. The second one here is we cannot assume that students arrive to our college campuses knowing what it takes to be a successful college student. A lot of them don't. And even the ones who were successful in high school, I've talked to a lot of them, you probably have too, they get here and they go, whoa, what worked in high school doesn't work here, right? They find that happens. And so they're in the same position as a student who maybe wasn't as prepared getting here. So we need to be sharing with students what it takes. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you all know, at least most of you, know what it takes to be successful in college. Anybody successful in college? Anybody? Okay, at least a few of you were. But even if you weren't, Hopefully you know what it takes to be successful at your college. And why are we keeping those secrets to ourselves? Why don't we tell students, this is what it's going to take. This is how much time it's going to take. These are the skills that you need. This is how to study. This is how to prepare for a test. This is how to write a paper. This is how to approach math problems. Why don't we tell students these things? We need to give up the company secrets, right? We want them to be successful and we know what it takes, so just tell them. We need to be much more forthright and not assume that students know what it takes. If you've talked to a lot of students, it's very clear that they don't know how much they're supposed to study. A lot of them don't know how to read a textbook properly, how to take notes, how to organize notes, all of these things that it takes to be successful in the classroom, right? But also outside the classroom, they don't know how to navigate these systems. They've never had to do that before. We need to be telling them what it's going to take. The third one is just something that's trying to get at the point that not all students need all 6 of these factors in the same way, at the same time, in the same intensity. But if we look at it, and as you're, again, building out your guided pathways, you make sure that you've got these 6 factors covered, then whatever a student needs, he or she should be able to access it when they need it, right? So just making sure that you cover your bases. The fourth one is the equity gap thing, and it's really about scale. And that's another thing that Guided Pathways is trying to get at, is we've got to stop doing everything at the micro level, right? It's really great for those 30 students or those 300 students who get into that special program, but what about the rest? What about the ones who aren't lucky enough to get into those programs, either because they don't qualify or they never heard of them? Can't tell you how many times I've talked to students who get into different kinds of programs, and one of the things I hear every single time is, I wish somebody would have told me about this earlier. Right? But we need to, if we did things at scale, then there wouldn't be this luck thing anymore. You wouldn't have to wait till you found out a year later about a special program. All the students would be special, right? That's what we're trying to do with Guided Pathways. We're trying to take luck out of the system so that every student has the same opportunity to success, okay? The last one, I put it last, but it really is very important. I think a lot of this comes down to this, is recognizing that everyone at the college, everyone, regardless of role, can help with student success. And a lot of times how you can help with student success, it isn't in your job description. Right? A lot of times it's just about being a good citizen of the campus. It's about stopping and helping the lost student, right? It's what you are conveying about the culture. I've talked to a lot of students, and they often describe colleges in 2 ways. This college cares about students. This college doesn't care about students. And you want to make sure, hopefully, that your students are saying the former and not the latter. And a lot of that has to do with how you set things up. It has to do with how you interact with students. And you have to remember, you're all representatives of that college. And again, no matter what role you have, you might be that student's first encounter. And so you're going to set the tone. You're going to represent that college and what that college is to that student. So we just have to remember that we can all play that role. The last part of this says faculty take the lead, and that's really only because not every student gets in a program or sees a counselor, unfortunately, unless you've mandated that yet. Have you mandated every student has to see a counselor? Okay, I'm seeing heads shaking. So that means not every student sees a counselor, right? Not every student gets that special help, but every student has a teacher. Kind of the definition of the word student. Right? So what that means is faculty in the classroom have an additional responsibility, because that faculty member might be that student's only connection to the college if they're not involved in any other way. So just remembering that. And I've heard so many stories of students talking about how faculty, particularly, changed their lives just by taking some time to talk to them, pointing them in different directions. Makes a big difference. So I'll pause here for any questions. Pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully it's resonating. Hopefully no questions means it's like good. Hopefully. I got more. Yes?
Do you have, like in the link somewhere, do you have more examples of student quotes?
Yes, in the full report, there's tons of them. I've never been asked that. I don't want to rush. Yes?
When you're saying
teaching students what it means to engage and those kinds of things. What are your thoughts about social learning strategies? So, for example, the perception that tutoring is for a bunch of failures. And to take the data about students who use tutoring have brought up their grades by this percent. And what are your thoughts on social learning strategies for teaching students how to navigate and how to be successful?
I think it is so key to take the stigma out of tutoring, especially since it's not actually true. And I know, at least in some of the studies I've done on tutoring, a lot of times it's the B student who's trying to get an A who goes to tutoring instead of the F student trying to get a C. And it has to do with stigma. There's some cultural issues that we have found, especially with men of color. And I think we also have to look at the diversity of our tutors and how it may feel for a young African-American male to go into the tutoring center and the only choices are young white females. There's a cultural thing kind of going on with that, and I don't think we think about those things, but I've heard that from young African-American and Latino males. I think there's also probably just males in general, there could be some issues with that. But I think that taking that stigma out, a lot of times I've seen some colleges, what they've done is they have required tutoring, so it just kind of evens the playing field, doesn't matter what grades you're getting. I've seen some other courses or other colleges take an approach of if you don't get if you get like below a certain score on a test, you have to go to tutoring. I don't know if I like that one as much because of it now starts to separate the class. But no, absolutely telling our students that it's okay to ask for help, whether it's tutoring or financial aid or any of those things. Absolutely. We have to take that on because otherwise we're relying on their fellow students to do it. That's what we're doing. We're hoping that they'll word of mouth, right? And so we put up the flyers and the teacher can encourage them and all of that. But usually what gets them to go a lot of times is their peers. Right? Does that help? Yeah. Any last questions before I move us along? Okay. So in response to going out and doing these, I was presenting at one college and they said, well, can you just give us like a top 10 list of things that faculty can do to help with student success? And I was like, yeah, I think we could do that. The students told us what works. So let's go through and find the ones that they said the most often. So then once we did that, I had another college say, well, what about everybody else? Right? And I said, we can do that too, because I said it wasn't just the classroom faculty who were having these impacts on students' lives. So that's what I'm going to share with you. Like I said, that's in your packet. Both of them are in your packet. I'm only just going to go through the everyone ones here. But before I start, I want to just remind us all about different perspectives, and that our perspective is different than what students' perspective is. And we kind of came up with this graphic where on the left, this is usually how we see ourselves with our org charts, right? Our hierarchies, this person reports to that person, this department reports to that one, right? This department doesn't get along with that one, right? All of that stuff is how we see ourselves and how we're organized. But do you know what students see? People. You're all just people. And for them, you fall into one of two categories. Either you're going to help me, or you're not. Right? And that's really what it comes down to. And this is just trying to illustrate that no matter what role you have at the college, you can play a role in student success. And so sometimes it's just as simple as asking that student that you see at the coffee cart every day, hi, what's your name? What are you studying? I'm this, I studied that. Having those kind of conversations can make a big difference to a student because you've made a connection with that student. And if that student runs into a problem, they know that they can probably talk to you. And even though you probably aren't the one who's going to fix the problem for them, you probably stand a better chance of helping them figure it out than them trying to do it on their own. So just little things can make huge differences in students' lives and the relationships that we build with them. So I'm just going to quickly go through these, and then at the end we'll have a discussion about it. But I said these are things that, and you'll see after each one in the parentheses is the different factors. And so again, it's that point I made earlier about there's one action can impact multiple factors at one time. So it's more about your actions than trying to knock out each factor one at a time. So we've already talked about the first one, asking students why they're in college, right? We talked a little bit about helping them navigate. This is very complicated. Have any of you ever tried to register at your own college? should try it. See what it's like. As I mentioned, as a few of you may have heard, I got lost trying to find this building. Heard a few of you others may have had the same experience yesterday. I had to find a student, and the student walked me over here to help me figure it out. And as we were walking, because I was in the really wrong place, so way over there, we had a chance to chat with her. I would have liked to have talked to her a little bit longer, but I was trying to find my way here. And I said, so this must have been like for you in your first semester here. She was like, yeah. I'm like, well, I think we all need to remember what that's like for our students, especially that first semester, and how intimidating it can be, and how lost you feel, and how you're not sure you belong in a lot of cases. So what are we doing to help minimize those? I'm not going to eliminate them. Everybody is going to come with those. But as much as we can do to help students not feel so lost and isolated, right, and that they don't belong, we need to be paying attention to. Connecting students with career exploration. This is a big part of guided pathways. You kind of have to have a vision for where you're going in order to know what steps you need to take to get there. And at least in California, this is not something we do well. Something that we do not invest in our career centers, in our career counseling. A lot of schools don't even have a career center. This is something we need to invest in, because students have a longer goal than just what they're trying to do here. But we are setting them up. We are giving them the foundation. But we need to kind of have an idea of where they think they're going. It doesn't have to be super, super specific, right? But we need to be giving them some of that career exploration and career guidance up front. This is another one. You talk to students, and people meet whatever expectations you set for them. You set low expectations, they meet them. You set high expectations, they at least strive for them. They may not always meet them, but they at least are striving for them. And this is something that we need to do. And a lot of times when we were talking to students and they were talking about these relationships they were having with people, accountability was so important. I heard so many students talk about, well, you know, Miss Smith, she really helped me, and I can't fail, I can't disappoint her. She spent all that time helping me, I can't let her down, right? And so that helps motivate them. If we hold them accountable, it does play a factor in their motivation. Asking students for their feedback. Is this working? Is this helping you? What's not working? What's not helping you? What's missing? We need to ask students that beyond just the regular survey that we all do. But asking students, you know, in your departments, in your classrooms, we need to be asking them these kinds of questions. And again, it helps them feel valued because it tells them that their opinion and their experience matters. Okay? And then I also talked about participating in out-of-class activities. Again, broaden your definition of out-of-class. Doesn't mean it's necessarily not class-related, but it's happening outside of class. But making sure that we're encouraging that, and part of that encouragement is telling them why. How is that going to help me, right? Why should I bother? Why should I spend my time, my valuable, limited time doing this extra stuff, right? But if you tell students why, then they at least can make an informed decision about whether they want to get involved or not. As I said earlier, there's not enough of us to go around, but anything we can do to help students build their own peer networks with each other. I heard so many stories about how students pull each other along, inspire each other, compete with each other. I met this one group of students, and they were just having competitions for every test. Like whoever could, you know, they were just fighting to try to get the highest score, right? And so it's like whatever it is, whether it's just kind of, you know, that kick in the pants from your friend holding you accountable, competition, whatever it is. But a lot of times I've heard from students at different campuses how hard it is sometimes to make friends, right? How hard it is to build these networks. And so we need to be looking at ways that we can help students build these mostly informal networks with each other. And so sometimes it's just a lot of students meet each other in orientation. And so if you've moved to an online orientation, you've taken that opportunity away from them. So maybe there's some other opportunities, some kind of get-togethers, whether you do it maybe by meta-major, some kind of meta-major barbecue. I don't know, but thinking about different ways to put students together in informal ways so they can build those things. It also happens in the classroom, putting together study groups, things like that. I've heard of faculty doing buddy systems where every student in a class has a buddy, and if your buddy doesn't show up, you better know where they are. because I'm going to ask you, because that's your buddy, you're supposed to have that relationship. There's all different kinds of ways that we can help facilitate without taking the responsibility, without, sort of always forcing it. You two must be friends. It's more about, putting them in these situations because they don't always find themselves naturally in those situations. So just looking at how we can support that. This one about pride. Again, if you're not proud to work at your institution, you can't really expect students to be proud to go there. Right? We need to make sure that we're showing them that pride, that this is a good school. I'm proud to work here. You should be proud to go here. You should be proud to be an alumni from this school. Right? So just making sure that we're showing students that. And the last two is I talked about value, making sure that we're looking for ways for students to contribute, talking to students, finding out about their hidden talents, perhaps, and maybe there's some connections you can make for them to be able to offer that. And then the last one is just making sure that you both communicate and demonstrate that you care. Right? I always use the kind of that 50s dad stereotype, the one who said, well, I don't have to tell them I love them because I put a roof over their head and clothes on their back and food in their bellies. That's how I show them that I love them. Right? Well, yes, that's fine, but you need to tell them. You need to tell them that you care. You need to show them that you care. Now, we did have these. They're not part of the 10 ways, but for the administrators in the room, we did put this in the report as well. It's just really about coming kind of from an administrative perspective. What are some broad things that can be done? So it's really about looking at, and again, this is from the students. Okay, I want to emphasize that again. Those 10 ways I just shared with you, these things for administrators, these are not our opinion. This is what the students said would really help them. And so we kind of glean from that what an administrator might be able to do or administration could do. And so there's about promoting opportunities to engage in different things. How do you promote that? I've been on all these campuses and I haven't found one. Actually, I did find one where the communication was actually effective with students. Like students knew what was going on that campus all the time. And they kind of, it was funny because they kind of complained about it because there was a lot of information kind of coming at them, but they couldn't complain that they didn't know what was going on, right? And so I think one of the mistakes we make is that we pick one way or two ways to communicate and we think that's going to do it. But I had a focus group recently and it was hilarious because the students started almost getting into an argument about the best way to communicate with them. And so one would say, well, I saw the flyer. Well, I didn't see the flyer. Well, where was the flyer? Well, it was in the center of campus. Well, my classes are on the outside of campus. I didn't see that flyer. Well, what about the sandwich boards? I see the sandwich boards. Well, where are the sandwich boards? Well, they're in the center of campus. Again, my classes are on the outside of campus. Well, what about the email? Well, I don't read my email. So that was the point to where every time there was a student who said, well, that's how I found out, there was always another student who said, I don't do that. I didn't see that. That doesn't reach me. And so what we came to the conclusion in that group is that you got to do all of them. Some will read a text, some will read an email, some will see a flyer, some will do you're going to have to do all of them, is basically what I walked away with and what the students walked away with, is that there's not just going to be one or two methods of communicating to get everyone to see the message. And then just the last two, about ways to bolster the image, right? This is thinking about, what does the campus look like? How much are you doing that? Because a lot of students we talked to, when they talked about community college, they didn't really see the value in community college, especially transfer students. It was all about the transfer institution. You walk around the campus and all the students are wearing university garb, and no one's wearing community college garb. It's those kinds of things. And so what are you doing to promote the image of your own campus and the value of the education that they're getting? Right here, foundational. First 2 years of college. Sets the foundation not just for transfer or but for life, right? A lot of the core skills that they get with us is for life. So making sure that we're promoting ourselves because quite frankly, no one else is going to do it for us, right? Is there someone else who's going to do it for us? Yeah, so we have to take on that responsibility to be our own advocates and our own promoters. And then the one above it is about helping students find direction. Again, this is what's funny about all this is all predates guided pathways, but doesn't it seem like it lines up pretty well? Okay. So where are we on time? So I was going to have a discussion here. I have time? Well, I got 10 minutes taken away from me, so I was hoping I could get those back. Okay. So let's just talk about this together. So I'm assuming a lot of you, hopefully there were heads nodding, and even if you weren't actually physically nodding, you were saying to yourself, we're doing that. I'm doing that. Right? My department is doing that. So what else? Anybody come up with, as you're hearing these examples, to say, I think we could do that. I think I could do that. I think I will do that. No one? Anybody have any ideas? Yes? One person has an idea. Yay!
In your work with students, do you want me to use it?
Sure, then we will just all come close on the mic.
In your work with students, how much success have you seen in leveraging peer support? I mean, it's mentioned on one of those slides, but we all don't have money, right? No one has money. Training students is not that hard to do, right? When it's done well. There are things we can ask them to do that will help ease our burdens. Simultaneously, if they're a peer mentor, they're engaged. They're also bringing their, right? What kind of solution is that? And how have you seen that work or not work? What are the benefits and pitfalls of that?
I think the main pitfall is trying to organize like a formal mentoring program. It takes money because somebody has to organize, has to pick the thing, has to follow up, has to do that. Where I've seen it work is to allow the mentoring to happen more informally, but you set up the circumstance. So for example, I've seen like tutors, like they're dedicated to a particular classes, and then they end up being mentors. You know, so there's that kind of thing to where they take, and then you train them. As part of the training is you give them a little, in addition to the tutor training, you're giving them mentoring training, and you're setting them up to say, you are an example. And these students are likely going to come to you with other issues besides helping them with their math, right? So a lot of it has been, that I've seen be successful, is to where the mentoring is, I don't know, for lack of a better word, implicit, you know, as opposed to explicit, to where it's just setting up those circumstances. It's also setting up the expectation for that tutor or whatever. We also have a lot of colleges that have ambassadors, and a lot of times they like do tours, you know, things like that, or they sit in the welcome center, but they start to actually have relationships with some of these students that they come in contact with. So a lot of times it was about putting a student in some kind of a leadership role, right, in the classroom, outside the classroom, setting them up to be equipped to be a mentor, because that is a different skill set than just being maybe somebody who gives campus tours or someone who does tutoring. But setting it up that way so that they're able to have those relationships, and then the mentoring kind of happens. That's where I've seen it. I said that where I see it fall apart is sometimes, and if you have the money to do a full-on peer mentoring program, fantastic. But I said what I've seen is it starts to fall apart because there isn't that person to kind of keep it together and make sure that mentors are following up, and you know, that accountability thing. That's what I've seen. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
I just have a question for you. So, I don't know if you can scroll back, but you had, I think it was number 4, faculty.
Here?
Yeah, so this having high expectations and holding them accountable, I feel like we blur this line all the time, campus structures and even within our classrooms. So, we have expectations, but I can tell you students were added to my class after ad drop was done. I just had a student who gave me their whole reason why they haven't participated in class for 3 weeks, and can you please let me catch up? So where do you propose to kind of draw that line of, you know what, you've missed 3 weeks and you should start over, or the compassion of, okay, try to catch up, knowing full well that 3 weeks is a huge hurdle to catch up. And I guess, you know, kind of the conversations we have amongst faculty is, well, if you give them a long enough rope, they'll end up hanging themselves in the wind anyways, so just let them do what they are asking to do. It's a really tough balance to have these expectations and hold them there without kicking them out.
No, you're absolutely right. That is a tough one. The first thing that popped in my head is, well, we probably should edit this to say, the expectations can be high, but they have to be realistic. They have to be doable.
Okay, so what's
Right.
realistic?
Well,
Do
you
your work
know,
and come to class, right? That's,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's a standard.
No,
that we've
that's
met.
probably, I wouldn't even call that a high expectation.
Yeah, but we meant that gets
Right.
meant every day, every hour.
So what's the
every minute.
policy about add drop though? That's the other thing that occurred to me. Why are you letting students into a class, setting them up for failure?
It just happens. I'm just saying, these things happen.
But
right?
you can change policy,
But there's a policy.
but it can be changed if you know, if you have
But we're not
evidence.
holding the policy, right?
But I'm just saying that a lot of colleges have stopped letting students late add because the evidence shows those students are more likely to fail. And you're right, you're giving them just enough rope to hang themselves. I hate that, by the way.
It's terrible,
Yeah.
but it's what's the reality of it, right?
But I guess what I'm saying is you can change the reality, not you personally, but the college can change the reality. If you have the evidence, then why are you doing it? Why are you setting students up to fail? If, you know, why, that can apply to anything. Why would we do something that we know doesn't work?
Maybe that's a bullet on your other one.
Yeah, exactly. But those were the two things that occurred to me, to where it's like, especially because it sounds like you have evidence that, or at least you could produce evidence that shows students who add late past a certain point are X% more likely to fail. And are we really doing them any favor by letting them do that? But yeah, the expectation has to be realistic for them. But I said, yeah, I don't know if that helps, but that's what occurred to me is going back and, again, not you personally, but going back to your college and looking at your late ad policy and ask, are you really doing students a favor by letting them add so late?
One more question, it's already now 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. To address Mary's concern, we have late start classes. And by having a late start class, that student would be a primary candidate for a late start class. You know, come back in 2 weeks, your class is being offered starting October 1st. And I think that still maintains high expectations and really doesn't set the student up for failure.
I would also be honest with the student, and I don't think we often share the data with students, like you were talking about the tutoring. Why don't we tell students, and again, it's more about giving them an informed decision, right? I mean, they are adults, regardless of what we may think or see. They are adults, but I said we don't always help them make an informed decision about things. And so that would be the other thing, is telling the student, okay, the policy will let you add, but let me tell you the truth. Let me tell you the odds of you finishing this class. And so you're gonna spend money, you're gonna spend time, maybe you pass, maybe you won't, and you're gonna have to take this class again anyway. So I'm not sure we're always very honest with students about the realities of what we're expecting from them. Okay, I'll get to go forward. So in your packet, there's a handout for you to do, hopefully, when you get back to your campuses. And again, what we're trying to say with these 6 factors, and we kind of did this graphic to help it kind of line up so you can see how they line up with the 4 pillars that you're working on. A couple of things. I think that for a lot of people on campus, the 4 pillars are not intuitive. They don't know how they connect to those. They look at those and go, well, I don't clarify a path. I don't actually help a student enter a path. Probably staying on the path is the one you get the broadest connection to, but a lot of people wouldn't relate to ensuring students are learning. But everyone can relate to the factors. And so we often are kind of hold these factors up as a more intuitive way to the pillars, to where you say, if you're helping students find direction and help stay focused, and you're nurturing them, and you're helping them feel connected and engaged and valued, then you are helping with the 4 pillars. Right? So like I said, we talk to a lot of classified staff especially. The 4 pillars don't relate to those, but they all relate to the 6 factors. So that's one of the things that we're kind of setting up. And then what's in your packet as well is the crosswalk. So one of the things that we did when Guided Pathways kind of first started is that we were seeing these connections between the work that we had done and what Guided Pathways is trying to do. And so we built that crosswalk to help you kind of make those initial connections. And what you would do with the handout that's in there is use that crosswalk to kind of help you kind of take an inventory of what you're already doing that are, through the factors that are helping with build these 4 pillars, and hopefully help you find those opportunities and any challenges that you can kind of foresee. So that's what that is about, and this is just the instruction of how to do that, but it's on the handout as well. So I would leave you with these next steps for you to think about, right? So making sure that as you're doing guided pathways, this first one is key. You must consider things from the student's perspective and understanding that their perspective is not the same as yours now. It's not the same as when you were a college student, right? It's not your perception of their perception, right? So making sure that you are really in using student perspective the entire way. It's also not something where you do some stuff up front to help them pick meta majors and then you never ask them anything else ever again. Right, so every step along the way as you are changing your institutions, you need to be getting that student perspective. Okay, so just don't lose sight of that. Make sure that, because a lot of the things that are already happening on the campus, right, lots of really good things, lots of things that are probably held within one department or sometimes within one person. You need to share that with your colleagues. You need to share that at these kinds of events, right? This is how we get ideas of other things that we can do. So making sure that you're sharing what works. You also should share what didn't work and why it didn't work and maybe how you tweaked it, right? But I think there needs to be more opportunities on our campuses, especially across departments, to share what's working and what's not, what hasn't worked in the past. And then I would just encourage you, try one new thing. Just try one new thing. You can look at the 10 ways or something else that may have sparked in your mind, but try one new thing in your own work, in your department, as a college, but just try one new thing. And as I mentioned, there's all of this information, there's lots more information that's on the website with the full report where the quotes are, and there's a brief, and like I said, both things are there. There's an action guide, there's a primer, there's lots of information about that, and that's it.